Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Weekly Coder. I'm Chris, and this week we are going to just start where we left off last week. So that's basically how all these weeks go, right? we just kind of keep going from where we left off, unless we start a new project, which at some point we're going to get to here. So, I mean, there's not a whole lot left to do with Minesweeper, but, I guess we actually need to work on the gameplay here, right? Because at the very moment, what we've got is we press play, and, some tiles are generated. We've got mines that are being generated. We've got clues that are being generated. And then we've got these blank tiles that are also being generated. So we got all the tiles that we need. Now what we need to do, though, is we need to cover them all up, right? So that's going to be extremely simple because we created this, let's see here, this tile script. And right now, we tell it whether or not it's a blank tile, a mine, or a clue. So the other thing that we need to add here is we need to have a way for those tiles to be covered so that they're hidden and so that, there's actual gameplay. So in order to do that, we need to keep track of whether or not they are or are not uncovered. So I'm going to just create a property here, and we'll call this, we'll just call it isCovered. Yeah. So it's going to be a Boolean, and it's just going to be called isCovered. And we're just going to say is true. So by default, they're all covered, right? When they get instantiated, they're all covered. So the other thing that we need is we need a reference to a sprite that is going to be used for when they are covered. Right? And to that end, we also need to... No, we're going to do this in code. All right, so here's what we'll do is lookable is covered true. All right, so then we're going to do a public sprite, and we'll call this covered sprite. And we're going to assign that in the inspector. And then, let's see, what else do we need? So we're going to go and recreate the start method. Because what we'll do here is we'll create a private sprite, and that's going to be the default sprite. And then in the start method, let's see here, public, or no, is that void start? Private void start. All right. So in the start method, what we'll do is we'll get the sprite from the game object that's on the sprite renderer component. So the way that looks is we do get component sprite renderer dot sprite, and we actually forgot to put the variable in. So it's going to be default sprite. Okay. So this way we'll save ourselves a little bit of time, because what we could have done another way is we could have created another public sprite and called it default sprite, and then in the inspector we could have assigned that sprite as the default tile sprite. But since each prefab already has its sprite assigned to it, we simply grab it and assign it as the default sprite. And the reason that we need to know what the default sprite is because when the game first starts up, it's going to set the sprite of the game object in the sprite renderer component to be the covered sprite. Okay, so that's the other thing we have to do. So we grab the default sprite, and then when it first gets instantiated, we want to cover it. So what we'll do is we'll say get component sprite renderer dot sprite equals covered sprite. So that's how we set the covered sprite. Yeah. So now all of these should start covered. So the other thing that we need to do is that we need a way for the sprite to be uncovered when someone clicks on it. So before we write that method, okay, let's just check out and make sure that everything is working how we anticipated it to work. So we're going to save this script, and we're going to go into Unity. And the first thing we need to do is we need to look at our prefabs. And you see how we now, in our script here, we now have a covered sprite property, but we don't have any sprites set here. So instead of going through one by one and clicking each one, I'm just going to hold down the shift button while I've got the first one clicked, and then I'm going to click on the last one and get all of those selected. And you see how we have nothing here for covered sprite. So we'll just go down to graphics and then drag the covered block onto the covered sprite. Alright, so now if we look back in prefabs, if we click on each one of these, you'll see that the covered sprite has been assigned. Okay. Alright. So, do we really need that boolean? We should keep it, because I have a feeling we're going to eventually need it for something. But if we press play now, all of the tiles should be covered. Yep, that's exactly what we wanted. So they are all covered, so we don't know what's what. But if we look and we click here, we can see, and if we switch to scene view, see how these are called mines, and we can see easily where they are if we just click on them. And then here are the clues. And here are the blanks. So the tiles are still what they should be. They're clues, blanks, and mines. Their sprites are just different. So the effect that we want is that when we click on one of these sprites, one of these tiles, we want the sprite to actually change to what is underneath. So what is that going to look like? It's going to look different for different types of situations. So the first rule is that, number one, if we click on a tile that is a mine, okay, then it's game over. No second chances, you're done. The game is finished. So what usually happens in that situation, and it may be different with different versions of Minesweeper, but with the Windows version, the one that we're concentrating on here, is sorry, still drinking my coffee here. So the Windows version, which is what we're concentrating on, is when you click on a mine, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to check. Well, when you click on a tile, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to check if the tile is a mine. Or, I mean, it could check something else too, but let's just say that we checked and we have a type of tile back that's mine, right? So it's a mine. So then it says, okay, well, the person clicked on a mine. Let's find all of the other mines in the game, which is going to be simple because we just basically iterate over our array and find all the mines. So what we'll do is we will then uncover all of the mines, right, and show them. There's one other part, is that we need the ability to right-click on the tile, right? And the right-clicking sets a flag, and it's kind of a reference for us. So as we're going through playing this game, we can mark what we think might be mines. Well, when you click on a mine and you've got all these tiles marked that you think are mines, if those tiles get marked and you uncover a mine, but the tiles that you marked are actually not mines, then the tile that will be uncovered will be a mine with an X over it, so that it'll kind of, tell you that, hey, you thought there was a mine here, but there really wasn't. So it's going to show you that. So that's part of it. If you click on a tile that's not a mine, if it's blank, then it should check the surrounding spaces. And if those surrounding spaces are also blank, then it's also going to uncover those. And then it's going to check each of those for blank spaces around them. And if those are blank, it's going to uncover them. It's going to do that and keep doing it until it gets to a clue tile. Once it gets to a clue tile, that tile will not be checked for anything around it. It's just going to be uncovered, and that'll be where it stops. Okay? Same thing. If we get to a mine tile, we will not be uncovering that tile at all, and we will stop there. So it's only going to uncover all of the blank tiles around it, and it's going to uncover the first clue tile next to the blank tile that it found. Let's see, if we click on a clue tile, it's going to just reveal that one tile and no other tiles beside it. Am I missing anything? Nope, I don't think I am. Let's see, we're 11 minutes in. I'm just trying to figure out how much we want to do next here. I think the next thing that we need to do is we need to actually work on input, right? We need to figure out how in the heck we're actually going to figure out where, like on which tile, like the user clicked, right? Because there isn't like a cool method that we can call that says, hey, what tile did I click on? So we're going to create this method, and then we're going to figure out what tile someone clicked on, and so that we can actually uncover it. So that's going to be the next thing. So, and then after that, I think we're going to end this tutorial, and then the next tutorial is actually going to go into doing all of the checks and all of that algorithm stuff to figure out what tiles are around what, and what gets uncovered. So right now we're just going to work on uncovering the tiles, and then we're going to work on the next stuff. So the reason that I said all of this to you before we're actually going to do it is because I kind of want you guys to think about what we're going to do, and maybe see if you can come up with a solution before we go into the episode for next week, to see if you can maybe figure out what we might do to get at those solutions. Because part of being a programmer is actually finding solutions to problems. I mean, that's pretty much the definition of being a programmer, is there's a problem, you need a solution, this is how we're going to do it. Your solution might be different than someone else's, that's fine. It doesn't always have to be the same. There's no right answers. In programming, you do what's best and what works for you. So anyways, let's go ahead and get started with trying to figure out how the heck we're going to detect mouse movement, or a mouse click, or whatever. Alright, so what we'll do is let's jump into this game script. And what we need to do is we need to actually be able to grab the mouse position, but only the mouse position when you're clicking on the mouse, right? So, and Unity has this really cool way of getting button positions that are defined in the inspector, actually, and I can go over that with you if you like, but it's pretty simple. So what we're gonna do is we are going to create a method, obviously. We're going to do get input. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and let's do get input. And you know what, let's not call it get input, because we don't want to confuse anybody here. We're not returning anything, so we're just going to call it check input. so that the it's implied the function is basic, or the method is going to basically handle everything that we want it to do. So then we'll just do this, and you know, to keep things simple, we could literally just right click and click on quick fix, and then it'll say, hey, use generate method game.check input. Okay, so it's gonna basically like throw something in here for us. So it throw new not implemented exception. So that's just a way for us to know that, hey, you know, when we run something, this is gonna throw a warning out and say, hey, you didn't implement this method. Well, so here we go. We're gonna implement it now. So I'm gonna just remove all that, and what we'll do is, let's do this. If input get mouse button down is fire 1, right? So that's the first mouse button. Then let's see here. We'll capture the mouse position. And that's going to be from camera.main.screen to world point, and it's going to take input dot mouse position. So what's happening here is, what is going on here? Represents text as a series of Unicode characters. Oh, it's not get mouse button down, it's get button down. Okay, that's right, because fire 1 is a button that's actually associated with not just the mouse button, but it's also associated to a joystick. So what we're doing is we're calling this generic function or method get button down, and then we're passing it fire 1. So that could be fire 1, which is a left click on the mouse, or fire 1, which is a button click on a joystick. Fire 1 is also a key on the keyboard, and so that just kind of makes things easy and allows us to use multiple input devices to basically accomplish the same thing. So now what we need to do is we need to actually, because what this returns is a vector 3, which is floats, but we need integers because we need to know the x and y coordinates of what was basically pressed. So we're going to go with int x equals mathf, and use mathf functions, dot round to int, and we're going to do mouse position dot x for x, and then int y equals mathf dot round to int, and that'll be mouse position dot y. So now that we have that, all we really need to do is we need to get the tile that we clicked on, right? So we do tile equals grid x, y. Okay, because those x and y values represent coordinates in our array where our tile game object is stored. So now that we have our tile game object, we can actually check to see what kind of tile it is. We don't really care about that right now, but what we do care about is, first of all, saving the script, and then we're going to jump over to the tile script. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a quick method here to help us out. We're going to say public set is covered. Okay, and that's going to take one argument of, and we'll call this covered. Okay, so it's going to be a bool, and it's also going to be void. And what we'll do here is basically we're going to make it so that the tile is uncovered. And the way to do this is, first of all, we're going to set isCovered to false so that we can keep track of its state. And then we are going to change the sprite. So we'll do getComponent sprite renderer dot sprite equals default sprite. And that's what we created that default sprite for earlier, is so that we can switch back to what it's actually supposed to be. Okay, so, and that's really all we need in here. So now, back in here, we can go tile.set is covered, and then we can pass false to that. Okay, and that should do everything that we need to uncover the tile. So now, if we basically, if we save this and then we go into Unity, if we press play, I think I did everything right. We can actually, we should be able to click on every single one of these tiles and it should uncover them. So there I am uncovering tiles. And it looks like they are exactly what they're supposed to be. Let's see here. So we've got, this is a mine, and then there's a, let's see, there's one mine around here too. There's 2 mines, so this can't be a mine. So that's cool, right? So let's see here. If we press play. Alright, so that's actually the right behavior, right? If we click on a clue, it should only uncover one tile. Now, we click this blank tile, which means what it's going to happen next is it needs to check all around, and it should only check tiles that are not covered. So that's what we use that Boolean value for, because if we check tiles that are already uncovered, then it's a little bit inefficient, right? Because we're already checking things that don't need to be checked. So what we'll do is we'll say, hey, is the tile covered? And this will say no, so we won't even check that tile. Then let's check this one. Is this tile covered? It is. So we need to check, is it blank? Right? So then it's going to check, and it's going to say, no, it's not blank. So this tile, right, it's going to be uncovered, but it's never ever going to be checked again to see if there are blank tiles around it, because it's a clue. So then it's going to move on to this next tile, and it's going to say, hey, is this blank? Nope. We're just going to uncover it and keep going. Then it's going to check this tile. Is this blank? Nope. We're just going to leave it there and keep going. Is this blank? Yes. So with this tile, what we'll do is we'll put it into a list, and we'll say, hey, this is a tile that we'll have to check again for adjacent tiles around it, right? So we'll do that, and then it goes to the next tile. This is also blank, so we'll add that to the list of tiles that we need to check still. This is also blank, so we'll also add that. This is not blank, so it doesn't get added. So out of all the tiles that we've uncovered, these 3 tiles, being blank, are added to a list. So we have a list of 3 tiles that we basically go back to and say, hey, we need to check all the adjacent tiles, but only if they're covered. So it's going to check, oh, covered? Nope, 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 nope. Oh, this is covered. What is it? Oh, it's a clue tile, so I'll just leave it. It's a clue tile, so I'll just leave it. It's a clue tile, so I'll just leave it. So now we're down to 2 tiles being checked, this one and this one, right? So it's going to say, all right, well, which ones are uncovered? None of these are, so these are not being checked, but these are going to be checked, okay? Let's see. What's this one? Leave it. This one is blank, so we'll add to the list, right? So now we're back to 2. This one's blank, so we'll add it to the list. And this one won't get added to the list. So now these 2 are in the list. So then it'll go through and say, all right, uncovered, uncovered, uncovered. All right, check, stay, add to the list, add to the list. So we've got 3 tiles on the list now, which is this one, and this one. So this one checks only 1. All right, so now we've got these 2. So this one checks these 3 tiles, add to the list, keep it. So then we get to this one. It only has 1 tile to check, so we don't do anything. So then what will happen here is we have these 2 tiles left. So it's going to say, all right, well, I'm going to check this tile. Okay, nothing, nothing. Okay, so then we're done. So in one turn, right, by clicking this tile, it should have uncovered all of these. All right, so that's what I want you to think about. For the next episode, that's what we're going to be doing. So I know, I'm sorry for all the talking. I know usually it's more coding and more, gameplay, but sometimes I like to throw some logic and theory out there for you guys to just kind of, think about. Alright, so I think that we're pretty much done with this tutorial for now, until next week, obviously. I'd like to thank all of my patrons over on Patreon. Thank you for your continued support. It means the world to me. If you haven't yet checked out my Patreon, have a look. Pledge if you like. I post member-only access stuff there, such as assets to projects, full project, source code, and everything else. So go ahead and check that out if you like. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up, and don't forget to click on subscribe and click the bell for notifications. Comments go down below as always. Hope everyone has a nice week, and I'll see you next week.